Thanks, Joe. Yes. Thanks, everybody. My students and I at Lincoln have been looking at pasture mixtures, and it's a student-led project, really. These other names on the front page here. Sam Anderson set up the experiment and looked at the establishment phase. Susie looked at the following full growing season. Cameron and Sonia looked at the second growing season, all as part of their BXI honours dissertations. And Finza is a recent PhD student from Myanmar, and she's helping us follow up the experiment in the later stages. So we're interested in mixtures, and we are trying to find the optimal blend of species to formulate a pasture mixture that maximises yield or any other pasture function that we might be interested in, whether it be mitigating nitrate leaching or maximising pasture quality and all those sorts of things. And the balance of species to include in the mix and the proportions, so richness and evenness, all those sorts of things. We're also trying to disentangle, if you like, the effects that species have on the mixture, okay, so the direct contribution of the species, and also the effects of possible interactions amongst those species, like a clover and a grass facilitating together, and we get a yield improvement. I mean, that's the basis of why we grow ryegrass and white clover in low nitrogen soils. And whether or not those species effects and interaction effects are robust and consistent across environmental considerations, conditions, and management conditions. And in this example, we looked at a sowing method, so the physical separation of species at sowing, and whether that would actually improve these species contributions and interaction effects in mixtures. Okay? So we set up a mixture experiment, and to do that, Sam had to formulate some seed mixtures. So we first of all had to decide on 3 species and cultivars of each of those species. So Sam said, okay, we'll take one species from each of 3 functional groups, and we heard Cameron and Gerald talked about functional groups in the ryegrass cultivar space, but here we're talking about it in a species space. So we've got base ketchupwood perennial ryegrass, tonic plantain, and apex white clover there. And in the diagram, that indicates the 7 mixtures that we looked at. So in the corners of the triangles, we've got monocultures. On the 3 sides of the triangle, we've got 2 species combinations, 2 species mixtures. And right in the middle, we've got 1 3-species mixture. And they were all set based on seed count, and we had to have a constant seed count across all of those mixtures, because otherwise the sowing rate might also influence our pasture performance. So we started with 30 kilos a hectare of ryegrass equivalent, and if you do the seed weight calculation, that actually equals about 830 seeds per square metre only. And everything else had to match that 833 seeds per square metre. So we've got different sowing rates there in terms of kilos per hectare, but actually the same seed count per square metre. Right. So we impose those treatments, we mix those species together for the mixtures, and also we keep those species separate and planted them down using one of our plot seeders. It's a cone seeder. It's got 2 cell wheels, so it's got 2 cones, so we can sow 2 species, and we can also take advantage of that little box in front of the drill there, and that's actually designed for fertilizer rate, but it's got a metering system, so we can actually put a 3rd species, the ryegrass, down that space, so we can reconfigure the drill to actually sow up to 3 species in separate rows and alternate drill rows. Okay? So the yields, well, this is what some of the pastures look like in the alternate rows. So this machine works. So here we've got an example of ryegrass and white clover sown in separate drill rows. Each of those drill rows are 15 centimetres spaced apart. And here's the example of the 3-species mixture, with the species also sown in alternate drill rows, the ryegrass, plantain and the white clover. So now the yields for the first full year from sowing right and through to the end of the first complete growing season, okay? We'll take it in steps for each of our mixtures. So here's our ryegrass, plantain and white clover monocultures in the first full year from sowing. Ryegrass is doing its thing, so as expected it's the winner in the first year after sowing. And now we go through, so we've got an identity effect, so the species differences are operating there. Ryegrass is doing well. Ryegrass plantain mixture yielding the same as the what we'd expect from the ryegrass and plantain grown by themselves. If you grow ryegrass and white clover together, you get that diversity effect, so that yield increase over and above what we'd expect from the monocultures. So that gets a star on it, so that's what we want. We want to maximise that. Plantain and white clover does exactly the same thing. 3 species sown together, not so much of an improvement, okay, a little bit lower, and that might be something due to the species content, the clover content perhaps. Separating those species in alternate rows, ryegrass, plantain, same as mixing them together. Ryegrass, white clover, a little bit less compared to mixing them together, no benefit. And plantain, white clover about the same compared to mixing together. And then the 3 species mixture is doing the same. We're not getting any additional increase by combining all of those 3 species together compared to our best performing 2 species mixture. The second year, pretty much the same deal, but now we've got white clover coming to the party. It's taking advantage of the low nitrogen soil. So we've got an identity effect. Ryegrass, plantain, no yield increase. Ryegrass, white clover, yeah, it's doing well, as is plantain, white, and so on. And again, separating those species, no yield improvement compared to sowing them together. And look at the composition compared to sowing them together and separating those species, almost exactly the same, okay? Despite that physical separation. So to conclude, we've got different species contributions. It's kind of like a national forage variety trial, but instead of ryegrass cultivars, we've got species. And we're trying to explore the effect of those species and their interactions. And we can also say that we're getting strong positive diversity effects by growing ryegrass and white clover and plantain and white clover together as expected in low nitrogen soils, and also no additional increase from that 3rd species coming to the mix. We've seen no enhancement of those species effects and diversity effects by separating those species at sowing, which is really interesting. And that's the main conclusions that we found. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. Is there a question for Alistair? Question from Kate from Twizel.
Thanks, interesting work. With the work that Sanderson did in America, they found that as they increased sowing species diversity in the mix, there was no impact if it was a good year. It was only in years of climatic extremes that they found an impact. So how does it stack up against the kind of climate for the years that the experiment ran at Lincoln?
Yeah, okay, good point. This study was irrigated in the summer, grazed 8 times in the year with sheep, so and on good soils near Lincoln University campus. What I might expect is when you've got water and nitrogen, you would see a species effect, you would see that diversity effect. Nitrogen fixation, the facilitation of the clover for the grass and the plantain is all happening when we've got soil moisture. Summer water limitation, it's all about plant survival and recovery after that. So the recovery phase, we might also see that diversity effect to continue with the additional nitrogen supply.
Hi Alistair, just one more question. You're talking about diversity there, but you're basically talking about 3 pasture species that occupy the top 30 centimetres of soil. Do you expect any different result if you chose species that use different parts of the soil profile for their water and nutrients?
Yes, and that will come down to the species effect, okay? So if we've got a plant species that is able to extract moisture deeper than another species, then that will make that particular species contribute differently to the mixture than the shallow rooting one. The diversity effect will come from if those 2 species with different root structures were able in some way to increase the moisture supply and actually facilitate the growth of both species. And I haven't seen a lot of evidence for that.
Thank you, Alistair. I think it's time for more questions at the